Welcome to the Ground Jewels. My name is James Dixon and I'm delighted you've joined us again this week. This week we have Jim Al-Khalili on to discuss Elland Road. You'll know Jim if you're big in the quantum physics world, also from the BBC. He's the presenter of the Life Scientific, a really sort of well-known voice in science broadcasting, and he's a big Leeds United fan. And he's got a very interesting sort of personal story, really. He grew up in Iraq watching the team from afar back when, in the days when the FA Cup final was beamed around the world and was appointment viewing and all that kind of stuff. It's a really nice chat. And I think you'll enjoy Jim. We're obviously going back-to-back science. The previous week we had Adam Rutherford on. And if anyone was listening to that episode on Portman Road, you'll have known how nervous Adam was before the final day of the championship season. And obviously it's a pleasing result for him and all Ipswich fans as they're now promoted to the Premier League. And Jim, we did talk to Jim before the final day of the season as well, but at that point he was sort of resigned to the playoffs, and obviously Leeds are playing Norwich this week, a big game at Elland Road, so it's nice to get a little primer on Elland Road before that big matchup in the Championship playoffs goes ahead. I want to make a small, quick apology for a few days that this has been delayed in terms of getting this podcast out. I know I normally try and get it out on the weekend. Life just intervened this week. It's been a very hectic time with work, some family things going on, and the start of the cricket season as well. And, had to prioritise the start of the cricket season. A fantastic start for Oxton, which hopefully will soon become your favourite village club in Nottinghamshire if you don't have another one already. We managed to put out a second 11 for the first time in 25 years. On a Saturday, which won its first game. The host of this podcast may have hit the winning runs in that game. Very chuffed about this weekend. Three teams out over the course of the weekend, and it's really nice to be part of a small but growing village club. And we had, beautiful. We had players from three generations of the same family playing for our second 11. So we had Mick in his 70s, still a fantastic bowler, taking 3 wickets. We had his son Jason, brilliant wicket keeper, should have had a century, got himself out on 96, but match winning innings nonetheless. And Jason's Mick's grandson played as well. So yeah, lovely stuff. I mean, that's what sport is, right? That's definitely what cricket is. You've got people from 3 generations being able to play together, old versus young, people of all shapes, all sizes, all backgrounds coming together over a shared love of a game. It's wonderful. People know, regular listeners know, if you're here just for Jim Al-Khalili, you will learn, and hopefully you do join us and stick around because, it's a nice podcast. But regular listeners will know we do a little bit of ground news. We go around the grounds to look at what's happening in grounds and stadiums. And Old Trafford. The everyone was sort of piling in on United, rightly so, for the state of Old Trafford, which was apparent during the Arsenal game. Obviously, Arsenal won 1-0 to keep the title race still going, but there was lots of jokes at Manchester United's expense because of the waterfall essentially that was falling from Old Trafford during pre-match. There was a good joke going around social media that it was the Old Trafford was currently the 4th highest waterfall in England at 55 metres tall. We've talked about Old Trafford before. It's in a state of disrepair. They're trying to do something about it. They say they need to do something about it. It's quite clear evidence that it's not fit for purpose, and you can see the years and years and years of underinvestment from the Glazers, who have been, quite extractive from that club, and that's a matter of public financial record, and that's their business model. But that's why United aren't doing so well and haven't been, for most of the time that they've been associated with United. In news a bit more local to me, we've also talked about Nottingham Forest before. And Nottingham Forest was sort of negotiating in public with the council, talking about moving, looking at a location outside the city to move to. Forest have been offered the chance to buy the city ground freehold from the council. And I'm going to fast forward here and tell you how it's going to end. Forest are going to buy the freehold. The council in Nottingham have no money. They've had sort of auditors brought in to help them because they've effectively declared bankruptcy. Forest are going to get a great deal on this stadium because it's an asset that they can sell, and the council certainly won't want to alienate, the biggest team in the city and the fan base of the biggest team in the city. So Forest are going to presumably get a great deal to buy a prime piece of real estate just next to Trent Bridge, and hopefully they'll be able to develop the stadium there because presently there's far more people wanting to go to Forest games than can get tickets for them. But that's sort of stadium news for this week. I want to get to our interview with Jim because it's a good one. So today on The Ground Jewels, we've got Jim Al-Khalili with us. Jim is a quantum physicist, a fellow of the Royal Society, and a much-loved voice on Radio 4 as the host of The Life Scientific. Jim, welcome to The Ground Jewels.
Thank you for having me.
You've had, it's our pleasure, you've had an extremely distinguished career. You've interviewed some of the brightest brains and biggest names in science, including Nobel Prize winners. So what on earth are you doing on a podcast about sports grounds? And what ground are we going to talk about?
Well, I say my interests, the important things that I have in life are physics, family, and football. The football, the love of football, I think came before the science. And it's a love of one club in particular, Leeds United. And of course, Elland Road, their famous stadium.
When did that love start? Because your life is very interesting, as you know, you obviously with the career that you've had, but you were born in Iraq, in Baghdad, I believe, and you didn't move to the UK permanently until your sort of late teens. But so does the Leeds love come there, or does it come before then?
The Leeds love comes earlier. So you're right. I grew up in Iraq. I had an English mother, Iraqi father, and so English was spoken at home. Like every kid in Iraq and like every kid in most countries in the world, you grow up falling in love with football and picking a team to support. So for me, it was Leeds. My grandparents in the UK used to send us regularly shoot magazines and match magazines. So we'd, follow the news. We'd also listen to the BBC World Service for the football results every Saturday evening. My brother and I both started to support Leeds in the early 70s when they were the team to support. In fact, I think I had various teams that I followed, but it was the 1973 Cup final, Leeds against Sunderland, that really got me hooked, because everyone was supporting Sunderland, it seemed, because they were the underdogs. They were second division, Leeds were in the first division. And I sort of felt sorry for Leeds. I said, well, if everyone's supporting Sunderland, who's supporting Leeds? Never having lived in Leeds or Yorkshire, I didn't know. So I sort of felt sorry for them. And then when they lost to Sunderland in 73, then sort of my sympathies only grew, and that was it. That was the club for me. And of course, the next year, 74, they won the league championship, and that was it. I was hooked. So this is supporting Leeds from afar. Because of my English grandparents, we would come over to the UK, even before we settled permanently in the late 70s. We'd come over to the UK every couple of years for the summer. And I remember it must have been in 76 or 77 that I had my first visit to Elland Road with my brother. We went to a sort of an Elland Road open day. It wasn't for a match. It was sort of a fans open day where we got shown around the stadium. That was my first visit. Of course, since then I've been there sort of relatively regularly for matches, but that was my first encounter with this team that I had fallen in love with from afar.
Wow, that's fantastic. I remember those sort of open days. They used to be, obviously they'd be the summer, wouldn't they? Be, just pre-season,
Mm.
get everyone down. No, that's fascinating. And when you were back in Iraq, were you going to games in Iraq as well, or was football purely Leeds and something that happened in England for you at that time, or were you experiencing sort of local matches too?
I was football mad, so I
Yeah.
played football probably every day. There weren't that many things you could do back in Iraq back then compared with, say, in England. And so football was just something, we'd take every day, you'd take a ball out and kick it about and play matches. We used to go to football matches in Iraq. So the league there, there were some clubs that were sort of based around cities, but others were, the army team, the police force team, the student union team. So we supported the Air Force called Tehran. So I had my Iraqi football club that I supported and my English football club that I supported.
Oh, fantastic! And that team, I mean, you're right. It's one of the great eras to support Leeds United. They were in the top four for 10 consecutive years of European
Yeah.
football. I bet you could probably name that first 11 now, even now, 50 years hence.
I could, in fact, interestingly, I do a lot of science communication, giving schools talks, and an old student friend of mine was head of physics at a big school in London, and he invited me to give a talk on I think it was something to do with cosmology and black holes and the Big Bang. And they took me out for dinner afterwards, the teacher and some of his students. And they said, we have a gift to give you to thank you for giving the talk. And it's the match program from the 1972 Cup final, Leeds Arsenal. He said, but you can only have it on the proviso that you name the Leeds starting 11. And I did, because these are, I think with a lot of people, sort of my age, you sort of remember not only, your club, but, who won the FA. I could name who won the FA Cup throughout the 70s, but I couldn't name who won the FA Cup the last 5 or 6 seasons, partly because it's probably only 2 or 3 clubs that tend to be sharing it out. But yeah, I remember a lot of detail from that 1970s Leeds team. I had my favourite players. Eddie Gray was my hero. That's the person I tried to emulate when I was playing football out on the wing. The Eddie Gray drop the shoulder, do the dribble, and then later than that, probably players like Duncan McKenzie and Tony Curry. I remember having big posters of them up on my wall in my bedroom in Iraq.
Oh wow, Duncan McKenzie. He was only with Leeds for a couple of seasons, so it must have.
Yeah, it seems like a lot longer. I think they and Nottingham Forest were another one of the clubs that I liked, and so they had Duncan McKenzie. So when they sold him to Leeds, that was it. So now it's my favourite team with one of my favourite players. So yeah, he was another hero.
Wonderful, and then obviously. You make the move, 1979, I believe. You'll know more than me. I'm obviously picking this up from second-hand sources, and it's quite a sort of traumatic time in Iraq. Really, there's a lot going on politically. It's the rise of Saddam and things like that. So when you come to, I know this isn't your mother's from England, but you're in a country you've never lived in. Is when you get here, is football the furthest thing from your mind, or is it sort of a universal language that helps you make new friends?
The latter, absolutely. I came over when I was 16, nearly 17, so the summer before I started my A-levels. And so, there were a few friends I knew, neighbours that I'd sort of met before on visits, but it was really football that got me interested in making more friends more easily. I remember going down the local park. So we and I still live down in Portsmouth because that's where my mother's home is. And so I'm going down a park in Portsmouth and just getting myself on. I see a football match going on. I'd go and hang around on the sidelines. So can I join in? And that's how I got to know a lot of lifelong friends. So yeah, football was really a way of integrating myself into this new world.
Well, it's very lucky you didn't end up supporting Sunderland, because my family on my dad's side are from Spennymoor in County Durham. And I did the same thing as you one time when I was up visiting from Birmingham. I took a ball down to the local park. And because I sounded a bit different, one of the kids thumped me and I went home crying to my dad. Okay. Slightly different reaction up in Spennymoor than Portsmouth, but I'm glad you got the nicer one.
Well, interestingly, it's how my parents met. Was my father had come over from Iraq in the 1950s to study engineering, and he met my mother, who was a librarian. This was in Portsmouth, but before that, he'd spent a year in Sunderland.
Oh wow!
Studying, and so he got taken to Roker Park, to watch Sunderland play. So he always says, Sunderland, he has a soft spot for them. But no, I guess my other team would have been my local team, as it still is now, which is Portsmouth. So I'd go along to Fratton Park to watch Portsmouth far more regularly than I'd get myself up to Elland Road to watch Leeds. But on the occasions when Portsmouth and Leeds were in the same division, then I would go along there and, with my brother, and we'd secretly, we'd sit with the Pompey crowd, but we were supporting Leeds. There was a wonderful, I remember a game, I think Leeds won 3-2 or 3-1. This is back probably in the early 80s. And Leeds scored the first goal. Peter Lorimer was still playing for Leeds back then. He was sort of quite big, barrel-chested by that point, into probably in his mid-30s. I remember Leeds scored the first goal, and my brother and I both let out a sort of quiet, yeah, because we didn't want to let Pompey fans. But my brother pointed, he said, there's a couple of guys over there, looks like they're Leeds fans as well, because they sort of, cheered quietly. Leeds' second goal goes in. A few more people sort of feel a bit more courageous and they cheer. By the third goal, half of the part of the stand where we were sitting all sort of leap up. And turns out these are all Leeds fans, probably of my generation, who'd supported Leeds as kids, who suddenly felt, empowered and sort of courageous enough to cheer for Leeds, even though we were sitting in the Pompey end.
Oh, a very brave thing to do at Fratton Park. Incredibly,
yes, yeah, absolutely.
Incredibly brave. So the 80s are a little bit the doldrums for Leeds, really.
Oh, very much so.
And I'm not going to attribute that to your arrival. I don't want to get correlation and causation mixed up with someone as eminent as yourself. But so you're down in Portsmouth. You're more than 200 miles from Leeds. When did you make that sort of first trip to Elland Road?
The first trip would have been sometime in the late 80s with my brother. Do you know, I can't even remember what the first match was, because I've since then, my son is now in his early 30s and of course also a Leeds supporter. Interestingly, when he was 2 or 3 years old, my sister bought him a Manchester United mug. Oh. Which, for Leeds fans, that's so. I unfortunately it slipped out of my hand and smashed. So I said, "Don't worry, David. I'll get you a decent mug." So he's now a Leeds fan, and we've tried to go up most seasons for at least one match to watch Leeds. But I really it's back in. I watch Leeds more for away matches. So if they came down to the South Coast, I remember I've been to see Leeds play Southampton. I used to go up with a Spurs friend of mine and watch Leeds play at White Hart Lane with him. So I saw them a lot more regularly as an away supporter than going up to Elland Road. I think there was just one occasion I went up to Elland Road in the 80s, but it's more in the last 10, 15 years that I've been... I won't say regular, because it's once or twice a season is hardly a die-hard regular supporter, but it's a long way to travel and I have a busy life.
You do. I mean, and doing this podcast, I like it because we explore lots of people's different fandoms. And we had Charles Zagnor, I don't know if you know him, from Test Match Special. He picked a ground that he's only been to once, but it had such an effect on him and it sparked a lifelong joy of the NFL that was the one that he wanted to talk about most. So I think we try not to. I would say we. It's only me here. We try not to be too prescriptive in terms of fandom is fandom, and what it and the stories of how you get there are interesting. I wonder, because of where you are on the South Coast, and you're saying you're going away. Were you there at that famous game at Bournemouth in 1990 when Leeds got promoted to the First Division?
No, I wasn't there. It was, that was at a time in my careers before the kids were born, when I was still establishing myself as an academic scientist. and so I was traveling a lot for conferences and starting to lecture students and so on. So it was hard for me to find the time to go. And then for the few seasons after that, once my children were born, again, it was rather difficult to justify going away to watch football matches when I was away from my wife quite a lot anyway through work. So I was being a good husband, and so I missed occasions like that.
and if the marriage lasted, then maybe that's
exactly. That's right. Yes, it's worked. So probably the right choice.
No worries. The New Statesman asked you when you were happiest a little while back, and you said, and I'm going to quote this. You said, and this is in order of importance, but you said, when both my children were born, my wedding day, my first date with my now wife of nearly 37 years, being elected a Fellow of the Royal Society, and Leeds winning the First Division in 1992. That's pretty good. It's made the top 5.
But yes, I mean, maybe if I was a true football fan, I would put that higher up. And I'm sure lots of people might even put that above their marriage or even the birth of their children. But I was also aware that my family will be reading that article. So I had to be doing that. Not that it wasn't true, but yeah. 1990, I always joke with my son, who was born in 92. I say, 92 was such a great year. You know, Leeds winning the last First Division Championship. Oh, and you were born as well.
Oh. He's very lucky he wasn't called Eric then, isn't he?
Well, very true. Yes, absolutely. Yes. I do remember a wonderful occasion. The following season, I went to the Charity Shield match in '93. It was Leeds-Liverpool. And Cantona was playing for Leeds then. So that was, the Wembley Stadium ringing out "Où are Cantona" before he went off to some other nondescript club. What I love about that match, which, by the way, Leeds won, was that they were doing the Mexican wave around Wembley Stadium. But it was late in the match when Leeds were winning, and the Liverpool fans were a bit disgruntled. They didn't want to play Mexican wave. So for the half of the stadium, the Leeds fans would also leap up in this coordinated Mexican wave. Then they would calculate and wait when it should have gone round the other half of the ground with Liverpool fans not moving, and then start again when it came round to them.
Oh. Super. I mean, that's the. I mean, talking earlier about when the FA Cup really mattered. It's that was when the Charity Shield really mattered as well. I remember watching. Yeah. I think Cantona scored a hat trick. Leeds win 4-3.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It was another trophy.
Yeah. And the last one for a while.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So what are your memories of that 91-92 team? Managed by Howard Wilkinson, some players like fantastic players like Gordon Strachan, Gary McAllister, Gary Speed. A fantastic midfield.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. David Batty. These were players who. Gordon Strachan in particular was such a fantastic buy for Leeds. He'd already had his career, and he was coming to the latter end of his career. But he turned the club around, the team around, in a way that probably Billy Bremner did back in the early days of Don Revie. Strachan was the fulcrum around the whole team sort of was built around. But yeah, absolutely, players like Gary Speed, sadly no longer with us, really made it and McAllister made a very, very exciting midfield.
It's just a shame that it was quite short lived in terms of, from a Leeds fan's perspective. You pip United that season, and then you have probably one of the all time bad title defences the following season, not winning away from home, which must have especially if that's where you're seeing them, it's awful if they're away form down.
Yeah.
So when did you begin going to Elland Road in this semi-regular manner? Is it when your son's coming of age? Are you coming during the O'Leary years, or are you a bit later in the are you going when it's really bad, when you're in League One, the third division? When's your engagement with the ground?
Yes, it was probably around the real sort of dip in Leeds' fortune. So my son David must have made the first visit would have been about 14 or 15. So we're talking, and he was born in 92. So about 2007, 2008, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So this is, after the fall from grace, after Leeds were told they were trying to live the dream, and I'm always bitter about that, because I remember at the time when Leeds got relegated from the Premier League, that was probably the Premiership back then. Leeds and Chelsea were both, similar sized clubs with similar sized support, were both roughly £100 million in debt.
Mm.
Chelsea got bought by Abramovich, and he just signed off the checks and paid off the debts and so on, and they sort of kicked off from there. Whereas Leeds didn't have a Russian billionaire oligarch to rescue them. We had Ken Bates who came in, and then it was Leeds were stretched themselves. They're trying to live the dreams. Well, a lot of the big clubs today are so far in debt, but it doesn't seem to bother them. And Leeds had to sort of rebuild very, very slowly from nothing, and sold all their best players.
Yeah, it was really interesting time, because I just a little bit too young for the '92 team, but I really, strangely for someone growing up in Birmingham, supporting Birmingham City, I was quite invested in that 2000 Leeds team. I played them a lot on Football Manager games.
Right.
They had those great Champions League nights against Milan and Lazio, and
yes,
and it was just.
You got semi-final against Valencia.
I didn't want to mention the Valencia game, but
well, I remember watching that. I was away at a conference somewhere, probably France or Germany, some physics conference, and I insisted with my colleagues that we had to find a bar with a TV to watch that Champions League semi-final, and I was so depressed after that, getting so close, having I could remember the Leeds Bayern Munich 75 European Cup final, when Leeds really should have won, and Bayern Munich stole it from us.
I mean, you can't libel the dead, so let's Franz Beckenbauer influenced the referee, and
he did. Yeah, that's right. Yes. Such a shame that goals disallowed, and then they go and score at the other end. That would be hard to for most Leeds fans of a certain age. That's hard to get over, which is why we still sing "Champions of Europe."
Yeah, it is one of those things. If you're just versed with the history from the textbooks and not the sort of social history, the oral tradition that's sort of passed down from fan to fan, you might go, "What are they on about?" But it's 1975. You actually banned from Europe for 4 years because of the less than kind way that some of the fans reacted in Paris that night. So it's all part of the lore of the club, and I remember I was at a game in League One between Leicester and Leeds. And this is obviously two great big clubs that were down at that level for the first time. And there was 30,000 at what was then the Walkers Stadium in Leicester. It was a horrible game, won by a scrappy goal by Steve Howard in the last minute. And I came out of that with nothing but admiration for Leeds fans. They'd come away, I think it was Bank Holiday Monday, they'd sung all game. They're in the third tier, and they were the best fans that I'd seen at Leicester, because that's where I was at university at the time. I'd seen all season, and I just thought, there's something about this fan base. And I know you're not a universally loved fan base, but I think I would find it hard if there were football fans that didn't respect Leeds fans as a collective. And I think from that moment, I just thought, and when you finally got back there with Bielsa, and back into the Premier League, that must have been quite a moment.
Oh, that was amazing. The sad thing was, of course, that was during the pandemic.
Yes,
and obviously you couldn't, I mean, I guess for locals, fans who live in Leeds, who go regularly to home games, there is always that bitterness that we missed out on celebrating winning the championship that season. We couldn't really celebrate properly. You didn't have fans running onto the pitch and celebrating. It all had to be done from afar, remotely, which is why we had high hopes for this season.
Yeah. Well, yes, we're speaking the day after Ipswich won their game in hand away at Coventry, which means we're going into the last day of the season with Leeds needing 2 results to go their way. The Leeds need to win, and you need Ipswich to lose, don't you?
And Ipswich are home to Huddersfield, and I'm not sure Huddersfield, as Yorkshire rivals to Leeds, are going to do them a favour, even if they really could. Huddersfield I think they're relegated now.
Well,
they're down.
They're not technically down, but they would need a mathematical miracle on goal difference.
To win away to Ipswich to 20-0 or something ridiculous like that. So it's. I mean, Leeds have brought it on themselves. Getting thumped by Queen's Park Rangers 4-0, and losing at home to Blackburn, which no one anticipated. All the top teams in the Championship seem to have gone through a wobble, but Leicester and Ipswich have redeemed themselves in the last minute, and Leeds have just So we only have ourselves to blame for not getting automatic promotion.
Yeah, you do, and there is a certain joy in playoffs if they go well. Obviously, the odds are stacked against you,
which Leeds have never really enjoyed.
Yeah.
Leeds have never had a successful playoff campaign. I think they've not got through the 3 times they've been in the playoffs.
Oh, very well. Let's say yet then. I think there's quite a cruel irony in that COVID season, thinking about it now, because that's the season where you're promoted to the Premier League after a huge absence. Liverpool win the league after years of. And Rangers win the Scottish League after.
Yes.
It's a cruel twist, isn't it? That all those 3 massive fan bases that deserve, or haven't had that opportunity to come together, for those championships, didn't get the chance to because of the pandemic.
To celebrate.
It's not the worst thing about the pandemic. Don't get me wrong, but there's
no.
there's something there from a sporting point of view. So, what's your sort of match day experience? Like nowadays when you go, because it's a proper schlep. If it's a 3 p.m. kickoff, I can't imagine you're in much before midnight. You might even be getting a hotel up there. I don't know. So if you're going to the game, what's your experience nowadays?
Well, we go up by train. As you're right, it's an early start from the south coast. Go up through London. I do enjoy those match day train rides because you're actually mixing it with so many other supporters from other clubs, and it's really great sitting in a carriage chatting to Liverpool fans or Newcastle fans who are all, there's the camaraderie. Well, you think you lot have got trouble, think about our rubbish manager. So there's that camaraderie in complaining about your club. We tend to get to into Leeds round about midday. Grab a bite to eat in a local pub, and then we walk to the ground. It's a 2 or 3 miles away from the station. There are the buses that take you from the city centre, but we like to walk. I always joke with my with my son David. As soon as we arrive at Leeds, I say, I'm back home. I'm back among my people. And he says, "Don't you dare try and put on a Yorkshire accent, Dad." Because what do you mean, your people? So we'll get to the ground early. And I remember it was a few years ago up on the big screen at Elland Road before the match, they play sort of archive footage of some of the great memories of teams gone by. And I was watching that, and I think I was watching probably Tony Yeboah with one of his wonder goals, and David looked at me and said, "Dad, you're tearing up. You've got." Are you crying? I said, well, it just means so much to me, just seeing, some of that footage, to be there, with the Leeds fans. We don't have a very good record. Well, David certainly doesn't from going to I think he's only ever seen them win once at Elland Road, which is of the 10 times we've been with the draws and defeats. He's just been very unlucky. I think I should stop taking him. He's a bad omen.
Do you have any other children that you might want to,
My daughter Kate is not so interested in Leeds. I mean, she'll play football on FIFA on the computer, but no, she's not a Leeds fan. But then, after the match, we will try and make that last train back down to London and back and come back that evening. So very often we're not going to leave the match before it's finished. But as soon as that's it, battle through the crowds and probably jog part of the way back to get. I think it's 7 o'clock or something like that is the last train. So if Sky mess with the fixtures, and put them earlier or later, that makes our life a lot more difficult.
As they are wont to do.
As
with
they
Leeds.
want to do, yes. And particularly for Leeds in the Championship, being probably the biggest club in the Championship, they get to go on Sky more regularly than others. But it means their schedule gets messed around, 12:30s and 8 p.m.s all over the place.
And do you have a favourite stand? Because you've got there's the John Charles. I think there's a Norman. Is it a Norman Hunter stand?
Yes, there's the Reevy stand, the big
Don Reevy stand, of course. Or is it wherever you can get sort of tickets, or where do you try and sit?
Which basically it's a case of where we can get tickets. You have to sign up, to be a member of the supporters club in order to get home tickets, and then we get what we get, and so we've been all around the ground. I like looking across at the Reevy stand because that's the giant cantilever stand, and so you just get a sense of how big it is. It's not so impressive sitting in the Reevy stand looking across at the other stands, which are rather smaller. The Leeds fans have all been hopeful that if we do get promoted this season, then our owners, the San Francisco 49ers, might invest in turning Elland Road into a 21st century stadium.
Hopefully. I mean, what they did moving from Candlestick Park, which was I've been there. I'm affectionately allowed to call it a dump, into the Levi Stadium in Santa Clara. It's amazing. So they know the benefits of having having a modern stadium, and all of the, not just the match day benefits, but all of the ancillary income sort of benefits that they can get from that. So fingers crossed from you on that perspective.
Yeah, it's just a lot of Leeds fans just hope that we can retain the Elland Road atmosphere. When the whole crowd, 38,000 whatever, are in full voice, then I suspect the atmosphere there is far, far better than 60 or 70,000, going to watch some of the bigger clubs, the Arsenals and the Spurs and so on. Just having a larger, more modern stadium doesn't make the experience more exciting. So I think many fans would want to retain that atmosphere and even keep the old ground if it means losing it, if building new stands. But we'll see.
When clubs change, it takes a while for people to almost to find their place again, because you need those hardcore fans together to develop that atmosphere. You need almost a Cop or a Stretford End, apologies, to sort of lead the rest of the ground and to be the sort of the cheerleaders for the team. So I think whenever a club moves, it disrupts that sort of natural order, and it takes a while for fans to get back in. Yeah. And where could be the other thing I wanted to just kind of praise Leeds for, and really and get your view. I think they do a really good job of honouring their heritage. They were one of the first clubs to sort of invest in statues of great players. Billy Bremner statue in 99, Don Reevy statue as well. They've also got legend stones around the ground, marking some of the great players like Johnny Giles and Eddie Gray, who you mentioned, more modern heroes like Lucas Radebe. So I'm sure the answer is yes, but I imagine that helps sort of connect, your experience with, going now as a fan to your experience as a boy. The honouring of heritage around the ground seems very important to Leeds.
Yeah, you do get that sense of a continuum that this is these aren't players or glory days in the dim distant past, that somehow there's a reminder, partly because Leeds had so much success in the 60s and 70s and then such a fall from grace in the 80s and then again in the 2000s after they've come out, that Leeds fans hang on to that heritage, hang on to that history, and Leeds fans probably know better than many other fans of other clubs who their great players were, who the great teams were, because there's that constant reminder, and that is very nice. It's as soon as you turn up at Elland Road, and as you say, there's the big statue of Billy Bremner draped in Leeds scarves always. And I think more recently with Bielsa, the Bielsa era, Marcelo Bielsa has also became a cult hero, and sort of murals and pictures of him around the city. The fact that he had to leave when things didn't go his way anymore, that he didn't have a plan B once other teams sussed out the Leeds high energy way of playing. I think he will be somebody else who carries on 20, 30 years from now. Fans will still look back and remember the Bielsa era very clearly, in the same way that we remember the Reevy era.
I think Bielsa, and this is broadening the remit here, but wherever Bielsa has gone, he's been beloved by fans. He's just, and even things that for other managers might raise an eyebrow or something, like the what was it, the spying and the taping of opponents. Just the way that he handled that, of course we'd do it. This is, why wouldn't we do this? It was it was such refreshing honesty that even when he's like caught with his fingers in the cookie jar, you couldn't help but like him.
Well, and he would hold these fantastic 2-3 hour press conferences where he would go through sort of PowerPoint presentations explaining exactly why he does things. The attention to detail was frustrating but endearing. I don't know, what reporters felt, but he'd always say something that they felt, that was worth commenting on or reporting on.
Maybe gave you some tips for some of your many presentations at conferences as well.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
No. I've got 3 hours. I don't care what the program says. It's fine.
Exactly.
Take this clicker off me if you dare. No. Well, Jim, thank you very much for sharing your memories of Elland Road and your story. How you became a Leeds fan. I think it's fascinating, and your passion and fandom is clear and obvious. And I, for one, hope you have a successful time in the playoffs, if indeed that's where you end up.
It looks like that's where we'll end up, James. But and even if, I mean, the one thing to say is that, of course, if we don't get promoted this season, the Championship is much more fun. In a sense, I'd rather be winning more matches than if we get promoted. As I listened to the Leeds United podcast, The Square Ball, and one of the guys there, Michael, was saying, well, if we get promoted, what do we have to look forward to? Possibly beating Crystal Palace? Is that what the ultimate of what we can hope for? If we stay in the Championship, it'll be more fun. Of course, the worry is that we are going to have to lose some of our most exciting players. Crescendo Somerville, Archie Gray, if Rodon goes back to Spurs. So I do worry that we may not quite have the exciting team that we've had this season if we have another season in the Championship. But who knows? Who knows what the future holds? I
would caution that the Championship stops becoming fun when the parachute payments stop. So
that's right. So get out sooner rather than later is the message.
No worries. Well, thank you for your time, Jim. That was really great.
My pleasure, James.
Thank you, Jim. Like I said, that was a good interview. I really enjoyed speaking to him. I think it's always nice when we're talking to people whose backstory isn't the traditional, my grandfather went, my father went, he took me on the terraces, and so therefore I support this team. I like those more circuitous routes, and a young lad growing up in Baghdad, becoming a Leeds fan, moving to Portsmouth, becoming one of the country's most eminent physicists. It's a great personal narrative, and I know he'll be heavily invested in the game this week against Norwich, and then hopefully for his sake, a playoff final subsequent to that too. But that's all we've got time for this week. Next week, we're going to speak to one of my favourite people in football, the writer, broadcaster and journalist Tim Vickery. You'll know him from the World Football Phone-In. You'll know him from the BBC's television coverage of World Cups. He's that good a journalist that he's been able to break the stranglehold on television, on punditry, on the BBC, and force his way into the World Cup coverage, because what he doesn't know about Brazilian football in particular, but South American football more generally, isn't worth knowing. He is a man who approaches the game with the right philosophy. He looks at it as not just as a sports fan, as a sports journalist, but also as a sociologist. He's always seeking to sort of understand the communities and the context of football, and understands that football sits within a wider social context. And we've already recorded it. We have a fantastic conversation about his favourite stadium in Rio, the Estadio San Januario, the home of Vasco da Gama. And as Tim tells the story, it is possibly the most important stadium in the history of Brazil. More important than the Maracanã for the evolution of the game in Brazil, and we know how important the game in Brazil is for the global game. So that's one to look forward to next week. Until next time.